Hi, everybody. This is the first time that I have done live on YouTube. So I have no idea what's going to happen, but let's hope for the best. So I did just do a live video over on my face page about hormesis and elimination of certain foods. But because I forgot to bring up the topic of intermittent fasting, I wanted to re-record the video here, so I'll have it in future to share. So as discussed in the video I just did on Facebook, when we look at hormesis, I think there's a lot that is misunderstood about hormesis in the general population and how it works and how it can benefit them. So hormesis, as we know it, is the concept that a little bit of something can be beneficial, whereas a lot of something can be detrimental. And to quote Dr. Rocky Patel, the poison is in the dose. So as we see with the science around too much sugar and too much insulin running through the body, and even too much sitting down, is that too much of those sort of things can obviously be very negative or detrimental to our bodies and to our health. So then when we look at what can we do that would be something small or in low dose or short-term exposure that's going to increase our resiliency or our ability to adapt to stress in the future while still promoting health and long-term health especially. So when we look at hormesis, a good example of hormesis would be the concept behind exercise. A small amount of exercise is obviously a good stressor for the body. It can promote resiliency, and then of course it causes the muscles to adapt in the long term. So when we look at exercise, we are starting with a small amount of exercise, a small load, which puts stress on the muscles. That then improves the resiliency of those muscle fibers, causes them to adapt so that over time, the muscles can then start lifting heavier weights for longer periods of time. They become more resilient to bigger amounts of stress over time. So a small amount of exercise is going to be very beneficial for us, but a lot of exercise, so overtraining or over-exercise, is obviously going to have a negative effect on us. It's going to drive up, obviously, muscle damage, inflammation, central nervous system issues there as well. So it does go in that a small amount of everything is going to be beneficial, but too much is going to be, in somewhat, depending on the situation, very detrimental for the body. Another example would be a vaccine. So a vaccine obviously exposes us to a small amount of molecular bacteria so that our immune system and our T helper cells, they get exposed to that bad bacteria so that they can then recognize the barcode on that bacteria. They can improve their resiliency. They can prepare their soldiers for that. If that bacteria enters the body, that they are ready, they're prepared for that bacteria again, so that you don't get such of an impact that you would had you, say, not been exposed to said bacteria. It's like when someone gets a really bad cold or a flu, if straight off the bat they throw in the towel and they just go straight on antibiotics, well, not a cold or a flu because they're viral obviously, but they get some sort of illness and they get put on antibiotics for, let's say, a urinary tract infection. I know a urinary tract infection can be very painful and can be very uncomfortable and inconvenient. But if for something like that, or even a throat infection, that you opted for more natural options that support the immune system as much as you can, like in the beginning, and if you find that you stick that out, now your T cells, they recognize that bacteria. They recognize that the next time that does enter your body, they're more equipped to recognize it and deal with it, so that the next time maybe your infection isn't a week long, it may be only 48 hours long, if not less, but you've built up your resiliency. Whereas if you hadn't and just came straight in with antibiotics, which knock out everything, then none of your cells would recognize this external threat that's been introduced into the body because they hadn't been exposed to it properly before. So that's another form of hormesis. And then when we look at hormesis in regards to food, and I know John Kiefer and Dr. Rocky Patel, which I just quoted, and even Ori Hofmeckler to some extent, has covered hormesis and the concept around dietary influences or hormetic eating styles. So when we look at hormesis in regards to food, there's obviously a lot, and there has been for a long time now, a lot of talk about elimination diets, especially as the paleo world and the ketogenic diet all blew up and became so popular. They're promoting, obviously, eliminating all grains as much as possible. The ketogenic diet, all carbs, are keeping carbs really, really low, so that even those people that did not have issues with carbs per se, or even gluten, where they eliminated gluten because this is what was recommended on this popular eating style. And I'm not against either of these eating styles, but they have their place, and there's obviously a lot that needs to be considered. That people decide, oh, I like the sounds of paleo, it has a lot of good stuff lined up with it, there's a lot of research, so I'm going to jump into that, and I think bread and gluten gives me bloating and gas and makes me uncomfortable, so I think that, but I'm not too sure. So these people then will eliminate all gluten from their diet, and maybe they didn't have a gluten intolerance at all. Maybe it was just an inflammatory reaction to just the carbs and not actually the gluten protein. So now when they do introduce gluten in the future, and let's say their body has had no exposure to gluten or even carbs for 30 days, 60 days, even 90 days, as some health professionals will recommend, that when they do have a vacation or a birthday, a slice of birthday cake or Christmas cake or anything like that, which is pretty much unavoidable forever because life happens. And even if you were like as obsessive compulsive as could be, and you ate out in a restaurant, you still can never guarantee that you are not getting any exposure to some sort of gluten. It's going to be very, very hard, and it's going to make life pretty tough. So then eventually when you do have that birthday cake or wedding cake or anything like that, you then maybe have given yourself an intolerance, and those few uncomfortable symptoms that you felt before you went on, say, the paleo or the keto diet, now those symptoms have come back with a vengeance, and they've come back tenfold because your gut, your body, your immune system has had no exposure for that 30, 60, or 90 days. So then they're like, what the hell is going on here when these very inflammatory molecules or proteins come into the body? And look, maybe you've given yourself a gluten intolerance. And the same can be said for nightshades and tree nuts and a few other things. And I'm talking about intolerances here before people say, well, some people have genuine allergies to tree nuts. I know that. So we're talking about intolerances. So when you're looking then, even with nightshades, like a small exposure to these so-called bad foods can have a hormetic effect on the body. So it can help improve your resilience of your T helper cells. It can help with your gut being more responsive to external toxins coming in. It can help with insulin resistance. It can help with thyroid production. It can help with boosting the metabolism. So there's a lot that can be beneficial from having this form of hormesis. So having something that's maybe not touted to be good for you, or not so good, or that everyone's saying you should avoid once or twice a week, can actually be more beneficial for you than if you avoided it all the time nonstop, because you're at least getting these constant exposures to it. Another example would be with kids. So parents that maybe are paleo followers, and they maybe do have gluten intolerances, maybe they are celiac, and they think that maybe these foods are going to be detrimental for their kids too, but the kids maybe don't have any intolerances. But because of the parents' experience, they will then put their kids on a gluten-free diet. And of course, we cannot control what kids eat, especially when they get into the teenage years. We can just pray and hope for the best. They may be out with their friends. They may grab a Subway and they haven't had proper exposure to gluten. And now all of a sudden they have that Subway, and maybe you have given them an intolerance to gluten and they get horrific symptoms. So again, if you've kids, it's okay to expose them to a bit of pizza, a bit of burger, maybe a cupcake here and there, to let their body see this toxin may enter sometime, and we need to be prepared to deal with it, break it down, and then get it out of the body in a nice, efficient manner that's not too overly stressful on the body, that we end up breaking out in rashes with IBS and all other horrible stuff. So when we look at food that way, it's okay. Small amounts of something, I believe, are going to be more beneficial. And the science and the studies, definitely the books that have been brought out by Ori Hofmeikler, like the Warrior Diet, and I believe the 7 Principles of Stress, they pretty much back up everything, and he has listed study after study after study in his books. And of course, it does contribute to sustainability of a diet and long-term adherence if people can have a few of these things that they do enjoy, but they've been told they can't have or they shouldn't have. So small exposures, not only can they be beneficial in the long term, they can contribute to better adherence to a healthy lifestyle. So then when we look at intermittent fasting, and this is definitely kind of the main concept behind the Warrior Diet and everything Ori Hofmeikler talks about, is that intermittent fasting, or fasting, especially in society nowadays, is a stressor. It has a hormetic factor. It is a form of hormesis. It is a little bit of something that in the long term is going to be very beneficial to you. So we are not, the majority of us are not used to not eating. We're not used to fasting. We have been raised to eat all our breakfast. You need breakfast before you go to school. Breakfast is the best meal of the day. You have to eat your lunch. You have to finish everything that's on your plate. Do you want cereal before bed? Would you like an evening snack? There's all these ideas that we have been pretty much raised on, most of us, especially for at least the last 60 to 70 years. So when we go without food, and intermittent fasting is pretty popular now, and there's tons and tons of studies that show the health benefits of proper fasting. But fasting is a form of hormesis. So when you do put your body under this short-term stress of having no food at all, not only are you improving the body's capability of survival and resilience, you're also improving sensitivity to hormones like insulin, like leptin and ghrelin, when food is reintroduced into the body, so that you may utilize it a lot better, that you may absorb nutrients a lot better. But in that stressful time of fasting, you're there, while you're in the state of hormesis, you're giving the body time to become stronger. The cells are allowed to heal. The body is allowed to regenerate. You become a stronger version of yourself over time with all these small increases or improvements in resilience every time that you do fast. So intermittent fasting is a very effective form of hormesis too. And it can be effective for almost everyone. There's obviously going to be some instances where intermittent fasting may not be such a good idea, but for a lot of people, especially in society nowadays, having a good understanding of hormesis in the sense of a small amount of something bad may be good for you. Intermittent fasting is going to be beneficial. It's not going to kill you. Over exercising, over training may be detrimental. So understanding all the different factors and implementing them into your lifestyle can help you be a stronger, more optimal version of yourself in the long term. So I hope this video was somewhat helpful on what the concept of hormesis is. So hormesis is how we help our body adapt to stress. So exposure to small or low amounts of stress then increases our resiliency or adaptability to higher amounts of stress in the future. And that doesn't just have to be from food or exercise. It can also be emotional stress, environmental stress, toxic exposure, viral stresses, bacterial stresses, even. And so our negative thoughts, as Daniel Amen would say, so it increases our resilience and our adaptability on every single level. And this, I feel, is important because it's the rare few people that are very, very disciplined that they can stay on a full elimination of a certain food for a long, long time without experiencing negative side effects, without experiencing any sort of restriction or being slightly miserable or even reductions in strength and metabolism and stuff. So it's important to have this exposure to external small amounts of stress or toxins or whatever you want to call them. Okay, I hope you found that helpful, and please do share with anyone you feel may benefit. And I hope this was a successful first YouTube video. Maybe I'll do some more. We'll see. Okay, bye-bye.